Alrighty, group. Moving on to the discussion of stability of adjacent structures. Looking at this photo, I have a couple photos in the presentation itself and thinking about what can go wrong. But what do you think, or what would your opinions be on a setup like this where the contractor is using sheet pile and an engineered shoring system, and then also just looking at the structure itself in the photo, determining, is this safe? Does it have some sort of deep foundation or basement that would prevent it from being undermined by the excavation nearby? So just some opinions. In my opinion, my professional opinion, and what I've experienced in the field as a sales rep and in safety, this would be sufficient to proceed safely with this excavation and not undermine the building itself. Now, those photos that I was showing you, that was actually from High Point, North Carolina in 2016 when I was a young sales rep. So what would you think about this particular photo? There was another photo that I took from the rear of the building where you can kind of see where the brick facade caved in and landed here in this small footer trench. And then now looking at the actual photo itself, what does this area immediately underneath the existing structure tell you about that soil? And does it have a foundation? Does it have any kind of footers, any kind of support that would prevent it from being undermined? In this case, no. So therefore, the competent person and that contractor, would be held liable. And even worse, if there were somebody, in this case, no one was injured or killed, but if there were somebody who was injured or killed, then that would definitely present some challenges for that contractor in the eyes of OSHA, from insurance-wise, from lawsuits, just to name a few amongst many other risks and hazards associated with this type of work. And I think that is it in this particular example. And the last one I wanted to go over was this kind of general distance rule for adjacent structures. And again, this is just a ballpark. Don't use this in particular as, a kind of a overarching rule. But typically when we start looking at moving and we're excavating near existing structures, and what I mean by an adjacent structure, it's different from a surface encumbrance, where a surface encumbrance is something like a tree, a curb, say pipe or materials or tools that are nearby your excavation that could easily be removed or relocated to prevent that from falling into your excavation to injure a worker. Whereas a structure is something that was there before and something that's there, it's going to be there after your work is complete. So essentially you're not going to be able to relocate this, very rarely. So you think about, in a perfect world, we have an excavation, we're moving close to a building, an existing structure. Now this excavation in this example is level and plumb. Of course, we understand that in your line of work that's never going to be the case, or very, very seldom will be the case. Generally speaking, if you maintain a distance of 1 to 1, meaning for every foot you excavate, you maintain at least that same distance from that building or that structure, you are generally in a safe area. But that's not to say that, like in the case of that photo I showed you from High Point, North Carolina, that if you do have a structure that has no foundation, it's just sitting on compacted soil, that this may not be sufficient enough. And in these instances, really what you would have to do, if you don't know what's underneath this structure, if you're not sure that there's a basement or some sort of underpinning or support underneath this structure that would keep it stabilized as your excavation nears, then in these cases, a lot of times the competent person in that construction firm will have to reach out to an engineering company or an engineer that's willing to stamp a letter and say, or design a specific shoring system that could protect this structure.